What's up, YouTube? It's your boy DC back with another tier list slash ranking video. That is so annoying when the balloons come up. I swear, I don't know why it does that. I'm just recording with my Mac camera. But anyway, I'm back with another tier list and ranking video today. This time it's got nothing to do with music. You clicked on the video, you obviously read the title. Today we are ranking all of Ohio's roller coasters. So there are two main parks in Ohio. Obviously, Cedar Point, world class, up in Sandusky on the peninsula on Lake Erie, also dubbed the roller coaster capital of the world for good reason. I actually just went there the other day, so which is why I'm doing this video. So those rides are still fresh in my mind. The other main park in Ohio is Kings Island down in Mason. I actually live about 25 minutes away from that, so that is my hometown park. Been there countless times throughout the years, so I'm very familiar with all of those rides. And I've been there 2 times in the past week, so those are still fresh in my mind. So I thought, why not do this now? It's a good time. So, little disclaimer, I'm not including any like kiddie rides just because I'm not a kid anymore. And in fact, I don't think I've done any of the kiddie rides at Cedar Point. I've done the Kings Island ones, but that was years ago when I was a kid. So not including any kiddie rides. But yeah, these are my tiers. I've got must ride, amazing, good, mid, skip it, and then haven't ridden. I'm pretty sure you know what the haven't ridden is going to be. But we'll get there when we get there. So we are going to start off with Adventure Express. Looks like we're going in alphabetical order. This is one of those classic aerodynamics mine trains. I would say it's a pretty good starter coaster if you're new to them. It's not too intense, not that thrilling, but it does feel kind of out of control at times, especially on those sharp turns. You know, it kind of feels like the wheels might like come up. It's kind of got that crazy feeling to it, honestly. It is a little bit rough. It's a bit on the older side. It does have a cool setting, you know, kind of through the woods. Then you're kind of near Banshee and stuff like that. It does have a very interesting ending. I would call it a weird ending, honestly. Just going up the lift hill with the temple people, you know, banging on the drums. But then that's it. Like, the lift hill just takes you back up to the station, so there's no drop at that. So yeah, the ending is a bit anticlimactic. So I'm honestly going to give it a mid. It's not bad, especially for beginners. If it's got a short line, I'll probably go to it. Like, I'm not going to not ride it, you know. It's not like I hate it, but it's just nowhere near the best in the park. So I'm just going to give it mid. Okay, next up, another coaster at Kings Island. And this one's actually also at Kings Dominion, the sister park. This is Backlot Stunt Coaster. This is another good beginner coaster, I would say. Good for the whole family. It's got a decent launch. And then that first helix is actually more intense than you'd expect. Then you just kind of weave through the, I'm assuming, Los Angeles theming. Yeah, I think there's like a Hollywood Boulevard sign or something there. But yeah, and then you've got like a break run where you're just kind of sitting there with the special effects. And there's actually a cool fire element, which does make me a little nervous just because fire kind of freaks me out like that. But then you go through the pitch black tunnel, which I remember as a kid, that was always fun, just screaming your head off and that. And then you pop out, go straight under the line waiting there. So that's a cool element. So once again, good starter coaster. If this one has a long line, there's no way I'm doing it. It's just not worth it. I would say it's about the same level as Adventure Express, so I'm going to put it in mid. Next up, we've got Banshee, also at Kings Island. So this is, I think, the longest inverted coaster in the world, if that record still stands. It's got the motion versions in the park, especially now since Vortex got removed a few years ago. Root Vortex. But yeah, Banshee, it's just very, like, I don't know if grand is a good word, but it's very, like, it has very drawn out elements from B&M. You know, the elements are also very smooth. It's got, you know, the barrel roll, the pretzel loop, heartline roll, I think is what that last element's called. Kind of feels like you're in slow motion. You get a lot of hang time there, which is cool. And I normally don't get dizzy on rides, but this one actually does make me a little dizzy, so that's nice for a change. And also, what's great about this one, it's normally not a long line, despite being in the front of the park. It also is very photogenic, and it has some pretty good theming. You know, the Banshee, the haunted, you know, the ghost girl that supposedly haunts the cemetery or the train. I think that's what the lore is. But yeah, overall, I would say this is an amazing ride. Is it a must ride? It's not, you know, quite my favorite in the park. It might not even be top 3. We'll see how we go, but it's definitely amazing. Next up, we've got our first Cedar Point coaster here. We've got Blue Streak, the only remaining wooden coaster in the park. This is from 1964, so you know it's a bit rough around the edges. They've probably done some touch-ups over the years. I used to think it was a lot more rough, honestly. The past few times I went on it, not too bad. It's got your classic out and back layout, goes towards the parking lot, so I guess you could consider it a semi-parking lot coaster. But yeah, classic, you know, airtime hills back and forth. Not too much to it. Definitely another good starter coaster for families, little kids who've never done them before. Not too scary. It's decent. Not a must ride, that's for sure. I'm going to give it the same level as Adventure Express and Backlot, so it's going in the mid category. Next, we've got Cedar Point's version of Adventure Express. I say that because it's another mine car or mine train from Aerodynamics, and this one is a lot less exciting than Adventure Express in my opinion. I always thought this one was pretty uneventful. Nothing notable really happens. It's kind of boring, honestly, in my opinion. It feels pretty slow. Also, for some reason, even though, I trust it and I'm an engineer, so like I know the structural integrity is good for them to keep running it, but it doesn't look that safe to me. It just like looks super old and doesn't feel that great, so that kind of creeps me out. I actually think this is a skip it worthy ride. I normally don't ride this when I go. Maybe once every other trip to Cedar Point, or if I have like family members who are young enough to ride it maybe. But yeah, I normally skip this one, so that's our first skip it ride here. Next up, we've got Corkscrew at Cedar Point. This one is very aesthetically pleasing, especially on the walkway. You've got the coaster doing corkscrews right above where you're walking, and that's honestly the best part of this ride because other than that, this ride sucks. I'm putting it right next to Cedar Creek Mine Ride and skip it. I normally do skip it. This one actually gives me a headache. This is one of the rare rides where I just don't want to ride it because it hurts. Like, it's a short ride, but the amount of pain it packs is substantial. Like, it's just super rough. It bangs your head. It's kind of similar to Vortex. I mean, same manufacturer once again, Aero, the defunct Aerodynamics. Yeah, it's just super uncomfortable and not that enjoyable. So I'm going to have to give it a skip it. Next up, we've got Diamondback, which is surprisingly 15 years old at this point. I remember when it first came out, I was about 9, and I was too scared to go on it, so I waited till the next year when I think I was tall enough. But yeah, Diamondback, classic B&M hyper here. Great airtime throughout, amazing hills, got a great layout, and especially that final splashdown ending. That's a very unique element, and it looks amazing, especially on video. Also, the theming and the paint colors are pretty cool. And that first drop in the back especially is amazing. So speaking of sitting in the back in that splashdown, if you sit in the very back and you like lean over at the end of the splashdown, you will get soaked. So that's awesome. Yeah, this one, I wasn't thinking about putting in a must ride. I mean, it's borderline must ride. It's at least amazing. Yeah, if you're a fan of airtime, this is definitely a must ride. And I am a fan of airtime. So, I'm going to put in must ride. Next up is Flight of Fear, the indoor coaster at Kings Island. This one has a pretty good launch, has that alien space theming, which is cool. The inside, you're normally riding in the dark, so you don't really see what's happening that well. There's a few lights, but for the most part, it's pretty dark. And the cameras, they can't really pick up on it, which is why I don't have a video playing for this one. But yeah, I think they call it the Spaghetti Bowl, with all the inversions, and it just kind of weaves in and out. Like, it's a very compact layout. I would say it's pretty good. It's not great though, especially like the line, like the wait times for this ride take forever for some reason. Pretty sure you can only run one train on the track at a time, so it has to complete the full layout before the next one can. And the line normally just like adds up because, you're out there in the middle of the summer and most of the queue is inside, so a lot of people see that and be like, oh, I want to wait inside in the air conditioning. But the line just takes so long, so it's not really worth it. But it's not bad though. I'm going to just give it a good. Next, we've got Gatekeeper at Cedar Point. This is a very aesthetically pleasing coaster once again. Looks great on camera, looks great off-ride, especially at the entrance. You've got the keyhole elements at the front entrance of Cedar Point, and going through those on the ride is also really cool. It's a close call every time. But after the keyhole elements, the very end of the ride, not that exciting. The final helix is, if you want to even call it that, pretty pointless in my opinion after those trim brakes. The first drop though, especially going up the hill, you get to see the beach if you're sitting on the left side especially. And then if you are sitting in the very front, it feels like slow-mo going over the first drop when you twist. And then if you're sitting in the very back, it just whips you over. So yeah, overall it's got some decent inversion, looks really good, cool keyhole elements. Yeah, overall I would say this is a good coaster. Not amazing tier in my opinion, especially at Cedar Point, but it's good. Next up, we've got Gemini. So this is your classic hybrid racing coaster. Having a racing element is always a plus. even if the races aren't that fair. I feel like blue almost always wins on this. I feel like it always has a head start just because it's on the inside track at first. But it's cool how this coaster, switches which train has the inside and outside track on the turns. And there's a lot of opportunity to actually high five the train going by because the inside car will overtake the outside car. So that's always a really fun moment on this ride. The steel track also makes it decently smooth until the final part. The final helix is kind of janky. But yeah, overall, it's a fun racing coaster. Not that intense, but just a good time. And you can't really go wrong with racing, like I said. So I'm going to put this in the good as well. Next up, we've got the inverted boomerang at Kings Island in Vertigo. Used to be called Face Off. Still have never even seen that movie. But yeah, it's an inverted boomerang, so it's automatically better than your standard boomerang. It definitely feels a lot more forceful, and not in the bad way. It could be a little headbangy if you're the wrong height, but if you're the right height, you'll be fine. And I like how you go through the track both forwards and backwards. If you're in the hanging seat first and you hang longer, facing the ground, that's definitely more scary, so that's fun. The capacity isn't great though because it is a boomerang, so make sure to only go on this if it's not too long of a line. But honestly, for being an inverted boomerang, it's good. I don't know if I would put it in the good tier compared to all the great coasters here. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to put it in good. It might be overrating it a bit, but I enjoy it enough to put it in good. Next up, we've got Iron Dragon. Basically Cedar Point's version of the Bat. Oh, we haven't even gotten to the Bat yet. So yeah, this is an aerodynamic suspended coaster, so the trains actually sway a bit in the air, which is kind of cool. Unfortunately, this one, I would say not the most thrilling. This is another beginner coaster for the whole family. It has 2 lift hills, which is a unique element, I guess, but nothing really notable happens. I would say after the second lift hill, when you're going down towards the pond, that's a cool moment, especially if the mist is on. Like, you get to go over the pond, but it's not very forceful. Me being, the thrill seeker coaster junkie I am, I don't really enjoy this one. I normally skip it when I'm there, especially if it doesn't have fast lane. I don't think it has fast lane, so this is a skip it for me. Next, we've got the first hyper coaster. If you're not a nerd like me, that means the first coaster to top 200 feet tall. And my brother actually rode this when he was just 4 years old. Apparently he was tall enough back then, which is crazy. I would say this ride is pretty polarizing. Most people either they love it or they hate it. It has great views of the water park and the beach and its out and back layout. So the reason why a lot of people either love it or hate it is because on the return trip back to the station, it has a whole bunch of these like wacky triangle hills, like just the way they manufactured it back then. I think they had to hand calculate and hand draw it or whatever. Whatever they did, the hills are just extremely forceful. Like, the airtime is insane on this. You will be ejected up and out of your seat every time just because the hills are not smooth. They're like literally like triangles, like I said. So if you like that, you're going to love this. If you hate it, you're going to hate this ride. Fortunately for me, I love it. I mean, it can hurt a bit sometimes, but I think it's super fun. So I'm going to give this a... man. Do I give this an amazing? I think I'm going to give it an amazing. Yeah. Next up, we've got Maverick at Cedar Point. Right off the bat, I'm just going to tell you, I think this is a top 2 ride in the park. So it's automatically going into must ride. This ride is insane. It's an intimate blitz, so it stays low to the ground. It's got a crap ton of crazy whippy elements. I love the crazy 95-degree drop. I remember the first time doing it, I tried to hold my hands up, and then I just naturally put them back to the restraint. And I normally hold my hands up, but it just felt so weird going beyond vertical. It also has an amazing launch in the tunnel. And I remember the first time I wasn't expecting that for some reason, so that was a nice surprise. Yeah, just all the elements just click, and the pacing is amazing. You know exactly what I mean if you've ridden this. I really wish we had one of these at Kings Island. That's what we're lacking. I hope something awesome like that goes in the Vortex plot. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the next few years. Next up, we've got the OG Giga Coaster. Again, if you're not a nerd, that means coasters that top 300 feet. So yeah, this is one of the best looking coasters of all time in my opinion, especially that lattice structure on the main hill. It's got a cable lift car, which is different than the normal chain lift. And honestly, I kind of think that kind of hurt its capacity because you have to wait for the cable lift to come back all the way down before you can start the next train. But either way, this coaster is all about its speed. It does have a couple airtime hills, but it's got, the long drawn out overbank turns. But yeah, the airtime and speed hills, really great. Love the tunnel elements. And the station flyby on the way back around is just so satisfying every time. You get to like wave and scream at everybody that's still waiting, knowing that you were in their position a few minutes ago. It's just super fun. This is a classic, still holds up. I do think it's a teeny bit overrated, or at least it used to be overrated, because this thing used to win like Coaster of the Year almost every year. And since then, a lot of coasters have topped it in my opinion. I mean, just look at Fury 325. That's the ideal Giga in my opinion. So yeah, I'm going to give this... I would say amazing. It's not quite must ride. Like last time I went, I only rode it once, and normally for the big rides I ride them twice. So just once, good enough for me that time. Yeah, it's an amazing tier though. We've got Mystic Timbers, perhaps one of the weirdest themes I've ever seen on a coaster. I feel like people make fun of it all the time, especially the shed element. The marketing kind of overhyped the shed, but it's still better than a normal brake run. But yeah, honestly, coaster itself, made by GCI, it's a world-class wooden coaster. This thing stays low to the ground, keeps its speed the entire time, and it's also super smooth. And most people who don't really know much about coasters see a wooden coaster and just expect it to be rough, but no, this thing is silky smooth, and it's just, it's got amazing airtime throughout. I really have no complaints for it. It's an amazing ride, and I honestly would put it in the must-ride tier whenever I go to Kings Island. Next, we've got Orion. So, a lot of people in the coaster community wouldn't even consider this a real Giga because it's technically not 300 feet. It's only 295, but because of the valley underneath, the drop actually is higher than 300 feet. Either way, I'm not getting that technical. This is a fantastic ride because it looks very similar to Diamondback. That's because B&M made both of them, and so people who aren't familiar would think, oh, is this just a bigger Diamondback? But no, it does some different things in it. The drop, probably better than Diamondback's drop. It should be, right? It's a lot taller. But then, you've got some different elements than just airtime hills, which is Diamondback pretty much exclusively. So, you've got that huge outer bank turn, I think is what it's called. That thing is amazing when you're sitting in the outermost seats, obviously. You've also got a great speed hill and a great floater airtime hill afterwards to get, your pop of ejector airtime, then your pop of floater. The Orion belt to return is actually more forceful than I was expecting. I get a little woozy on it just a teeny bit almost every time I ride it for some reason. But yeah, then you got that little pop of ejector on the left. And, overall, I think it's great. The only thing is I do wish it was a bit longer. It just feels a little tame for a Giga coaster. I feel like the layout could have done a little bit more. But that's a first world problem. I should never be complaining about having a Giga coaster at my home park. So I'm definitely grateful for that. And honestly, I ride this every single time I go, or at least I try to. So because of that, I'm going to have to make this a must ride. Next up, we've got Raptor, Cedar Point's version of Banshee. It did come out many years before Banshee, and this was kind of when B&M was finding their footing with inverted coasters, and I think they knocked it out of the park with this one. I always go back and forth on whether I like this or Banshee more. Banshee is a lot more like elegant, I would say, a lot more drawn out elements, a lot smoother. This one is way more intense in my opinion. It's got a lot shorter elements, so it's a lot more intense, especially the final helix at the end. I always feel the blood rushing to my feet. It's also got the quick barrel rolls, which are awesome, and the Cobra roll. And so, honestly, because of the last ride I got on this, I kind of prefer it over Banshee, just for right now. It'll probably change the next time I ride Banshee or ride Raptor again, who knows. But I just love how they're so different from each other. I'm just going to put them right next to each other in the amazing tier. Such a different experience despite being the same type of coaster by the same manufacturer. Just goes to show how much innovation B&M has done over the years. Next up, we've got Rougarou. So this one used to be the stand-up coaster at Cedar Point. It used to be called Mantis. I believe I rode it maybe like one time when I was like 10 or 11. And all I remember is it wasn't that great. A lot of forces being exerted on your spine. Doesn't feel that good. So I'm definitely glad they changed it to a floorless. But unfortunately, the floorless version of this is still not that great. Especially if you're wearing sunglasses and you're the right height, your head will bang into the restraint most of the time and it gets really uncomfortable. The elements outside of the giant vertical loop also aren't that noteworthy in my opinion. Just kind of feels like it meanders on after its final like corkscrew or whatever. I will say the line queue on the pond is nice. It's something different. Definitely one of my least favorite at Cedar Point, especially for the big coasters. It's not skip it worthy. I try to ride this at least once while I'm there just to get my coaster counts up, you know what I mean? But it's definitely a mid coaster in my opinion. Next up is a coaster that is anything but mid. I'm going to go out and say it. I think this is the number one coaster in Ohio, and it honestly might be the number one coaster in the US. A lot of people have made that argument. Me personally, I haven't been to that many parks. I've got Kings Island, Cedar Point, been to Kings Dominion, been to Carowinds, been to Universal Islands of Adventure. So out of all of the parks I've been to, this is my personal favorite ride. I need to stop delaying this. It's going straight into must ride. Yeah, it's a fantastic coaster. So I was one of the rare people that actually enjoyed Mean Streak before this was converted, mainly because I liked how Mean Streak passed through its own massive wooden structure multiple times. I thought it looked really cool, and I'm really glad they kept that feature in Vengeance. You're weaving in and out, doing crazy elements throughout the structure. It's also just a super long ride too. You basically do 3 loops around the whole circuit, and by the 3rd loop, you're like super low to the ground, like underneath the structure itself, which is awesome. Also, I think this has the most airtime of any coaster in the world, if that record still holds up, and it never gets old, man. The final bunny hops are actually so much fun. It's almost impossible for me not to laugh when they happen. And in fact, sometimes I laugh so hard on this coaster that I'll get like rib cramps, if that's even a thing, or whatever it happens. But like, it's like my body starts cramping up a little bit. Like, that's how you know. It's like you're getting a workout on the coaster. That's how insane it is. So this is the best ride in Ohio, in my opinion. Next up, we've got the Bat. So first of all, this one is kind of hidden. The entrance is close to Banshee, but you got to walk a really long ways just to get to the coaster itself. It's got a very long lift hill as well. It does give a good view of Great Wolf Lodge next door, though. And it's a pretty short ride. This is another aero suspended coaster I should have mentioned. It's definitely a lot more exciting than Iron Dragon, but it is also a lot shorter. Yeah, I would say it's more fun, it's more intense, but also shorter. It's a good starter coaster. Nothing really spectacular. I'm going to put it at the top of mid because I don't ride this every time I go to Kings Island. It's not a bad time when I do, so I'm going to put it in mid. Next up, we've got the Beast. Now, this wooden behemoth arguably has the best setting and night ride in the world. Going back through the woods the entire time, it's amazing. I highly recommend it if you're ever going to Kings Island. So sure, it has a lot of straight track, but it's very fast throughout, and that ending helix more than makes up for it. That helix is one of the few moments on a coaster that actually scares me, just because it feels so out of control and borderline unsafe, which is wild. So yeah, the Beast, absolute landmark, historic attraction, longest wooden coaster in the world still to this day. I mean, what more do you want? This is a must ride. Next, we've got the Racer. You got your good old-fashioned family fun racing coaster here. I believe this one basically revolutionized coasters in the 70s. I think it was the start of when theme parks started to add more coasters after they saw this. So, like, it kind of was the coaster boom. I don't know what the term would be for when coasters started popping up everywhere, so I'll just call it that. But, yeah, the races are also pretty even and fair most of the time, so you never know who's going to win. I would say this is just an absolute classic. You can't go wrong with it. I'm going to put it in good, right above Gemini, because I think this is the better racing coaster than Gemini. Next up, we've got Top Thrill 2. Now, unfortunately, when I went to Cedar Point last week, and at the time I'm recording this, it is still closed. It was open for maybe a couple days or a couple weeks, I think, at the start of the season, but there was an issue with the train itself. It was showing more wear and tear than expected. I mean, I don't blame them. It's a prototype, so hopefully the engineers can redesign it and get this reopened within this season. That would be great, because if it reopens, I think I'm going to go back to Cedar Point this year. I've ridden the OG Top Thrill Dragster plenty of times, and that one was all about that launch. This one looks like it's got more going for it. I think the first launch probably won't be that great. Going back, you're getting like half of a rollback, which I never got on the original thing. Kind of wish I did. So now everyone gets like half of a rollback. But what really intrigues me is that backwards launch going like over 100 miles per hour. That just looks incredible to me, and going up the vertical spike. And then you're finally going through the forward launch at 120 to make it over. It looks super fun. I cannot wait to ride it. I really hope they open it later this year. That would be great. But I got to put in the haven't ridden, obviously. Next up, we've got Valraven, the dive coaster at Cedar Point. Now, this one is a crowd pleaser for sure. It's a GP magnet. If you don't know what that means, GP stands for general public, not coaster enthusiasts. I feel like most of the general public is like super scared of this ride, but they love it. You know, they just can't wrap their head around a coaster, you know, hanging from the top and then dropping. Like my mom especially, she doesn't do coasters, but she thinks this is the craziest ride there, which is funny. All that aside, it's a great ride in itself. I like it quite a bit. It gives an amazing view at the top before the drop, you know. You see the whole park when you're up there, so that's cool. And the drop itself is great. You get some hang time, you get some weightlessness feeling. It's a great drop. Once again, you've got some B&M long drawn out inversions in here, not super intense, but pretty smooth nonetheless. Second drop, not as great, obviously. It's a lot shorter. But yeah, overall, it's a good ride. I'm going to put it in good. I'm going to put it at the top of good, actually. And last but not least, actually this might be least, but I've never ridden it. It's Wild Mouse. I've been meaning to ride it, but they still don't have fast lane for this, and this always has a super long line, so I just don't think it's worth getting in line for it. It looks amazing. I love the paint job on it. And Wild Mouse, I mean, it looks like a good family coaster once again. You know, if you get dizzy because of spinning, I probably wouldn't do it then. But yeah, hopefully one of these days I'll get on it. So yeah, that's going to wrap up my Ohio roller coaster tier list at Cedar Point and Kings Island. If you've ever been, let me know in the comments what your favorite ride is. If you haven't been, let me know in the comments which ride you'd want to do the most. Yeah, just give me your opinions down in the comments. I'd love to read them and maybe agree, maybe disagree. We'll see how it goes. So thank you all for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.